Right, on we go with the show. As Miami goes all New York and 9/11 on us, despite having no planes hitting them, although there was evidence of pulse waves before, during, and after collapse. All those condos and only one dead. Does that make sense? Well, if you know if it doesn't make sense, you know what it is. Having warned in the COVID section last week of watch out for flight cancellations due to pilots dying of the COVID jab and reluctance of airlines to use vaccinated pilots, right on cue this came in. Hundreds of American airline flights have been cancelled this weekend and Monday because of significant staffing and maintenance issues. As of Sunday, 123 flights were cancelled. As of Sunday afternoon, 123 flights were cancelled Saturday, 178 on Sunday, and 97 were cancelled for Monday, largely the result of a high number of sick calls, combined with maintenance and other staffing issues. American Airlines told ABC News that most of the cancellations were on A320 and 737 aircraft, but that it may continue to cancel at least 50 to 60 flights per day for the rest of June and 50 to 80 flights per day through July. So they are thinking the flights cancellations will increase over time then. As why would you say 50 to 60 in June and increase that to 50 to 80 in a month's time? Does that mean they think those who are sick won't recover? Or are they expecting even more sickness? Boeing announced this week they are considering using pilotless planes. Perhaps that is why the industry is deleting all of their pilots with techno jobs. One does have to wonder. Well, 2 years ago in the Clowns in Panic, we warned of the rise of the machines and the crypto dangers, and now people are seeing the evidence unfolding. And the question for all the people working in clown-based groups is, you do realise you are all next. Perhaps you should take over the mantle of an infamous RV promoter saying, it's all happening tomorrow. But unlike the RV, which was never happening, this will unless you act. A national shortage of midwives has put admissions services under significant pressure in Liverpool's Women's Hospital. And over the past month, the hospital has posted on its Facebook page several times alerting pregnant women that high levels of activity causing delays and appointment changes. Now, when they were asked what was the reason for the change to admissions, the hospital said a national shortage of midwives plus issues with existing staff availability, such as sickness, had increased pressure on staffing levels and services. Now, the staffing crisis also resulted in the hospital temporarily closing their midwifery unit at certain times. The hospitals, like the airline industry, the care industry, all forced vaccinated their staff. All three are exhibiting elevated and high sickness rates and also deaths of their staff. All three are also having great difficulty replacing the staff. And just like the teachers' union also, you want to know why? It's fairly simple. You treated your staff like shit and forced them into injecting themselves with an experimental techno-based poison. And regards to the care and hospital staff shortage, which will likely worsen, the great question is, Who will care for the sick and dying if the die-offs and side effects escalate? Will we get the alien-looking avian doctor arriving again? One does wonder. I was asked in an email last week to add a crypto-based site to our group. My response, yes, it's called crypto for a reason. It is a death-based currency designed to take all your rights and freedom away with one push of a delete button. Watch the series Continuum and then tell me cryptos are for the people's benefit. People have to wake up and see beyond the greed-based capitalism. Our children and grandchildren will never forgive this generation for getting involved with what is currently a scam. In future, it is a global control system. And putting it bluntly, we will not be promoting or putting fresh air tokens anywhere near our site or show. Our friends, loosely speaking, at the BBC. Let's have a little delve into them again, shall we? Since they're like criticising our pieces. But did you know the BBC, known as the British Broadcasting Company, or Buggering British Children, as more commonly known, was part share owned by a committee of members of the wireless industry, including British Thomson Houston, the General Electric Company, Marconi, and Metropolitan Vickers. Now, Thomson is part of Reuters, which is now part of the CIA. The same rogue companies involved like GE and the electric company and patent stealer Marconi. And most will not know who Metropolitan Vickers are or were. They were an electrical engineering company operating under the Westinghouse Group. And they were taken over by GE in 1967, which was later restructured into many other companies, including Marconi PLC, 1999. The FBI has opened an inquiry into the leak of personal income and data tax of some of the wealthiest Americans, according to law enforcement. The great question is, where does the same inquiry into several high-profile data leaks of the public's information, one has to ask? Well, where is it? Now, the independent non-profit publication ProPublica last week published the tax liabilities and incomes of billionaires including Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and Warren Buffett, amongst others. And the publication says it obtained thousands of tax returns for the country's wealthiest individuals that span more than 15 years. And the record showed that Buffett paid a true tax rate of 0.1%. For the benefit of John Hopkins people, that's a round figure, 0, with a tiny dot and a 1. 0.1% for a billionaire. And from 2014 to 2018, Bezos and Musk paid 0.98% and 3.27%, while everyone else pays 20 and 40. Now, the top marginal tax rate is 37%, but that rate is only applied to any income above $510,301 for individual filers. And ProPublica says the true tax rate is calculated by comparing how much the individuals paid in taxes with how Forbes estimates their net worth grew over that time. Of course, then all of the billionaires' net worth has grown substantially, as we have covered in other shows. And it's another example of rules for them and rules for us. Now, if there was a base tax rate for all, those with more money or who spend more, not less money, would pay the most tax. It's fairly simple. And Trump was given that project in 2018. Both Kim and I worked on it. And like all other help he was given, refused or failed to implement it. And yet some people want him back in. And according to the world's only viable intel channel, or so we are told, Trump will be dead of prostate cancer within the month. I guess time will tell again. More than 5 million people became millionaires across the world in 2020, despite economic damage from the COVID-19 fake pandemic. While many poor people became poorer, the number of millionaires increased by 5.2 million to 56.1 million globally. And in 2020, more than 1% of adults worldwide were millionaires for the first time. And recovering stock markets and soaring house prices helped boost their wealth, which is why BlackRock, Blackstone, the DNC are trying to buy up all American homes currently. Wealth creation appeared to be completely detached from the economic woes of the pandemic. Well, that always happens. And this was according to the researcher Anthony Shorrocks, an economist and author of the Global Wealth Report, said the pandemic had an acute short-term impact on global markets, but added this was largely reversed by the end of June 2020. Not for the general public, it wasn't. And he said global wealth not only held steady in the face of such turmoil, but in fact rapidly increased in the second half of the year. Indeed. All of these new millionaires can only be connected to the medical industry. Snake oil vulture capitalists playing on people's fear and sickness is the most despicable way of making money, in my opinion. In my opinion, all medical equipment and services should have a maximum profit margin of no greater than 10%. All the rest is pure greed. So while the millionaires were stuffing their pockets with pieces of paper with numbers, some 270 million people worldwide, the equivalent to the combined populations of Germany, Britain, France, and Italy, stand on the brink of starvation, according to the head of the United Nations World Food Programme, which he revealed on Thursday upon receiving the Nobel Peace Prize. And he said, because of so many wars, climate change, the widespread use of hunger as a political and military weapon, and a global health pandemic that makes all of that exponentially worse, 270 million people are marching towards starvation, according to David Beasley. And failure to address their needs will cause a hunger pandemic which will dwarf the impact of COVID. And if that's not bad enough, out of that 270 million, 30 million depend on us 100% for their survival, he added. Now, we warned of food shortages coming up in a February 2019 show. when deliberate flooding of all the food basket areas of America and Russia was unfolding at the time. But given this guy's from the UN, I guess despite being the head of a UN program, he didn't get the memo on January the 6th, where the other head of the UN and trustee announced she had personally had ended world hunger on January the 8th, 2021. I guess he didn't get the memo. And one has to ask, does anyone know what they're doing or saying these days? World hunger is a sad and worsening major issue and should never have been used as a platform, integrated or not, for clickbait headlines. Furthermore, nuclear weapons on tectonic plates, not Teutonic plates. Teutonic is related to the Knights and Black Eagle. Anyway, that was done a long time back, not recently, and was dealt with en masse just after the 2011 Japan Fukushima incident, and so that news is out of date by a decade. So there's no fears about that. But given the commander, as she goes by now, had previously announced that she has control of all the nuclear codes, then surely it was a pointless exercise of allegedly placing nuclear weapons on seabeds that the navies were doing, when only the commander herself has all the nuclear codes anyway. So the story itself becomes irrelevant based on that fact, does it not? I have no idea which people are feeding her scripts these days, but they're playing her like a fool. Due to her lack of knowledge surrounding the alt media prior to 2015, they are giving her old news to pass off as new. And those of us who have been in it longer remember the same stories a long time back. We have a term for it here. It's called bloop news. But with Kim declaring the Fed as void, all top bankers dead, all lead Rothschilds dead, all lead Black Sun leaders killed twice over, and she's the head of all the families, has full control of the banking system. Indeed, she is the lead banker of every bank, has full control of the military and intelligence systems, and the only legitimate world military under her command. One has to ask, why is she still complaining of them blocking her? Who is they? You cannot turn around and tell people she is the head and lead of everything. Because how can anyone block her when she's controlling all of that? And why hasn't Life Force Enforcement done anything public to date to remove the minions, given she single-handedly destroyed all the top levels, and kickstart the ailing restoration plan that now dates back 21 months? Surely if you own the Fed and have this enforcement unit who destroys everything, then the sensible thing would be for the enforcement unit to march into the Fed and the Treasury and take over control of it from there, would it not? If you are the lead of everything, in control of everything, and nothing is being accomplished or coming to fruition, who carries all of the blame for the failure of not bringing anything to fruition? This is not personal. It is based on decisions being made on the people's behalf that we all have the right to question and have answers returned in a dignified manner. Now, there was one piece of good news the Life Force pushed forward: Life Force Assurance and the treatment of soldiers. And that came directly from a plan that I formulated and revealed in our show a few years back. And one hopes it works, as it is a valid task and exercise to undertake. And I'm glad she has finally taken up that idea and running with it. But the great question is, where is the funding coming from? Because the Omega system is empty. August 17th, 2020, business merger. In New Mexico, evidence was filed in which HSI USA Inc. ID 5206022 of Utah qualified in New Mexico. It then merged with and into PayPal ID 5235375. So who is HSI USA Inc.? Well, Patreon operates under that name now for a start. And I suspect, given that there's a number of these same name companies, all of which are registered as foreign owned, this is part of the USA Inc. operated by the Crown UK organisation. The Crown was another group we were told by the trustee was squashed, and clearly they're not. As millions of American workers who've quit their jobs in recent months, even with 9.8 million people, there's a lot more, unable to find employment, others are quitting at record rates, pushing the quit rate to never-before-seen levels. Some workers are leaving for new jobs with better pay or remote-friendly working conditions. Others have decided to start their own businesses rather than collect a paycheck. Still, others are quitting with no firm plans, confident they can get a better deal elsewhere as the economy rebounds from the pandemic recession. The rate at which people are quitting is ridiculously high given how high unemployment still is, said Michael Pierce, senior US economist at Capital Economics. And he said people are so confident in their prospects of finding a new job that they're quitting at unprecedented rates. Now, nearly 4 million Americans left their job in April, according to data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I hope that wasn't influenced by John Hopkins. An unprecedented number in the 2 decades the government has been tracking this data, pushing the quits rate 24% higher than it was before the pandemic. Now, layoffs, which peaked at 13 million in March 2020, which was before the lockdowns, have come down to a more typical monthly level of under 2 million per month. Now, this could be a sign of the changes ongoing as people move away from the traditional core pirate slavery jobs and into something that works better for themselves. But those quitting and awaiting the return to normal are sadly deluded at this point. There is no going back. There was no normal to begin with. There is no old world and only a rising new one. Few in numbers, but not in application. Those quitting to collect unemployment and stimulus checks have never been part of a general contributing society. They are the harvesters with lazy minds and attitudes. That path for them is doomed. And it's all part of the phasing and shifting, and the key is to build up our world for when others are ready to join. Perhaps a body of people are not acting in the algorithmic way that the clowns relied upon them doing. But with the shift gathering pace, they may find it is they who are left behind, not the people. Over to the UK now. Boris Johnson & Johnson, the only man who seems to comb his hair with a sticky toffee apple, has now turned his hand to becoming a mystic. Given he has warned that the UK could face a rough winter, as he refused to rule out more lockdowns in the future. Now, the Prime Minister was asked by reporters if the country could face more lockdowns this winter, and he said, "You can never exclude that there will be some new disease, some new horror that we simply haven't budgeted for or accounted for." Budgeted for? Except the district he operates from has already done a budget and accounted for, as we'll find out later. But looking at where we are, looking at the efficacy of the vaccines against all variants, he said, that we can currently see, so Alpha, Delta, the lot of them, Kappa, I think it's looking good for July 19 to be that terminus point. I think what the scientists are saying is that things like flu will come back this winter. What did they flew away? Really? But we may have a rough winter for all sorts of reasons, and obviously there are big pressures on the NHS. Yes, because they've got no staff, as you've killed them with techno jabs, that's why. And he said, all the more reason to reduce the number of COVID cases now, give the NHS the breathing space it needs to get on with dealing with all those other pressures. And we are certainly going to be putting in the investment to make sure they can. Now, given he mentioned Kappa, which was completely out of context, as was the word terminus, what is Kappa? Well, apart from Alpha, Delta and Kappa being part of a secret alumni club operating from universities, but the Kappa has another meaning as well. A Kappa, a river child, also known as Kawataro, river boy, Komahiki, horse puller, Kawatora, river tiger, or Suiko, water tiger, is an amphibious yokai demon or imp found in traditional Japanese folklore, and they are typically depicted as green, human-like beings with webbed hands and feet, and a turtle-like carapace on their back. A depression on its head, called a dish or sara, retains water, and if this is damaged or its liquid is lost, either through spilling or drying up, the kappa is severely weakened. Now, kappa are usually seen as mischievous troublemakers or trickster figures, and their actions range from the comparatively minor, such as looking up women's kimono or dress, if they venture too near to water, to the outright malevolent, such as drowning people and animals, kidnapping children, raping women, and at times eating human flesh. Although sometimes menacing, it may also behave amicably towards humans. Not like politicians then. Now, the Palestinian Authority has cancelled a deal which Israel was to give it at least 1 million COVID techno jabs. And the authority said the Pfizer jabs were too close to their expiry date. And earlier, Israel said it didn't need an aging stock of vaccines and they were to be used to speed up the Palestinian vaccination program. In return, the Palestinians were to give Israel a similar number of vaccines they are expecting from the Pfizer organization later in the year. However, when the first batch of jabs from Israel arrived, Palestinian officials said they were even nearer the expiry date than expected. They said there wasn't enough time to use them and that the deal was off. Now, I'm not being funny here, but if I was a Palestinian, I wouldn't be taking anything off that fake state. Do you really think that state is interested in their health? And quite frankly, it was stupid to agree with it in the first place. President Maskman Joe Biden on Thursday called a bill establishing Juneteenth, the date commemorating the end of slavery in the United States, as a federal holiday. Biden, in what he called one of the greatest honors of his presidency, signed the bill 2 days before Juneteenth itself, which is on June 19th each year. In reality land, they never ended slavery at all. They just made white slaves to look like the blacks' position. The blacks then thought they were equal, which they were, and we were all slaves together in reality. That's how it worked. But one has to ponder over them creating this new holy day 2 days before the summer solstice, which we now all know is a ritualistic festival for the Dark Ones. But given the Inuits of the Arctic Circle have stated the sun rises 2 days earlier than it used to, is that why they shifted back 2 days? The clown's solar god, who is fake, is Ra. 2 US Supreme Court cases and 1 Australian, with the rules for one and rules for another and a total non-common sense approach. The Supreme Court on Thursday delivered a unanimous defeat to the LGBT couples in a high-profile case over whether Philadelphia could refuse to contract with a Roman Catholic adoption agency that says its religious beliefs prevent it from working with same-sex foster parents. So much for the church being all about God's creations. At some point, their fake program will collapse, likely by the next generation. The Supreme Court then, in the Dark Force's wisdom, reversed a lower court ruling that allowed 6 men to sue Nestle USA and Cargill over claims they were trafficked as child slaves to farms in the West African nation of Ivory Coast that supply cocoa to the 2 giant food companies. You know, if people are going to be trafficking, perhaps they can start with trafficking the children and grandchildren of the Supreme Court, or the Nestle and Cargill CEOs first, and maybe then they will realise what it means and the damage and pain it causes. Now, a court has fined 12 Australian media groups a total of $1.1 million Australian dollars, which is about $840,000 US dollars, for their coverage of Cardinal George Pell's now overturned conviction in a sexual abuse case. And the outlets admitted to a breach of a legal order in 2018 which banned them from reporting the verdict at the time. And a judge rejected arguments that their news reports, which didn't name Pell, were in the public interest. The great question is, who made the judge God? Since when should judges decide what is best or not for the public? Cohens. Highfalutin Cohens operating under the Dark Priesthood program is not there to decide what the public can and cannot hear. Now, some of Australia's biggest media groups are among those who were fined. This includes Rupert Murdoch's News Corp, was fined about 430,000 Australian dollars for its report on its site, the Daily Telegraph and other newspapers as well. Nine Entertainment, which publishes the Age newspaper and owns Channel 9, was fined over 600,000 Australian dollars for its stories. Now, the reporting ban enforced through a legal order was brought in at the start of Cardinal Pell's 2018 trial, and it was to prevent the possibility of prejudice affecting a separate trial he was to face on other charges. Yeah, right. Now, under the suppression order, journalists were banned from reporting any detail of the sexual abuse case, including his conviction when it was ruled by a jury in December 2018. Now, the Cardinal had previously been one of the highest-ranking Vatican figures and a close advisor to the Pope, and the High Court of Australia then decided to overturn the guilty verdict against Cardinal Pell on appeal. I guess the church were going to send fiery serpents or something. But watch out for high-profile takeovers or mergers of the media giants. This is the precursor. Like the OSHA story recently, how firms can have lawsuits against them for ordering their staff to be vaccinated. Large fines leads to corporate takeovers. Now, the next three stories, which will take us to the break, engages damage done against the people. But first is a positive news piece. US Immigration and Customs Enforcement Homeland Security investigators announced the arrests of dozens of alleged child predators and said it had helped rescue 15 children in an international operation that involved more than 100 raids in half a dozen countries last week. Between June 8th and the 11th, the HSI and counterparts in Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, Panama, and Ecuador conducted simultaneous raids on suspected producers and distributors of child sexual abuse material or explicit content involving children that authorities call CSAM. Good stuff. I was curious, as that story came after the one earlier, about the HSI initials given in the earlier story of HSI USA Inc. And one has to ask, is Homeland Security Investigations running the government known as USA Inc. The international charity Oxfam says it has dismissed 3 members of staff as a result of an independent investigation into allegations of abuses of power in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Oxfam said allegations were upheld against a 4th person who is no longer an employee. Now, the accusations include nepotism, bullying, sexual misconduct, and a failure to manage conflicts of interest. And he said, "We apologise to everyone who's been hurt by these abuses of power, and I hope the action we have taken demonstrates our resolve to tackle all forms of misconduct," according to Danny Sarisk and Jara, the Oxfam GB chief executive. And he said, "We strongly encourage anyone who has concerns to report them so we can hold those responsible for misconduct accountable." Now, in 2018, Oxfam was accused of covering up claims that staff had been involved in sexual exploitation in Haiti, along with the Clintons. Just saying. Not Hillary, just the other fella. But that is the tip of the iceberg, that case. They, along with the UN Peace Corps and other charities, all have a long history of abuse of the native populace. Mozambique we're going to next. And the Justice Minister is to investigate reports that staff at a women's prison has been forcing inmates into prostitution. Anti-corruption organisation for the Centre of Public Integrity has revealed that for years, prisoners from Ndelavela Women's Penitentiary in the capital, Maputo, have been taken to nearby guest houses to work as prostitutes for wealthy clients. And the undercover journalist spoke to current and former inmates who said they were forced to have sex several times a week. And the victim said if they refused to comply, they were beaten or punished with hard labour. Now, one of the women told an investigator that she had ended up in hospital having been beaten and having water poured over her. And this tactic of plunging people into cold or dirty water is often used by the security forces. Other inmates spoke about wanting to take their own lives. There were times when I went out for 4 days straight, an inmate said, adding that if she had not, I wouldn't be here anymore. Now, Borges Nahamir, who coordinated the investigation, said their research showed that this had been going on for 10 years, and it was like a formal business happening in jail, and we do not understand how the board of the jail, the commanders, could not notice that there was something very strange happening. And he alleged that the prison guards were benefiting financially from the sexual exploitation and even advertised when there was a new inmate. Now, the payments go from $50 to $500 per woman, and it depends on what they call the quality of the woman. Much younger, the more expensive it will be. Now, the women also alleged that they were being sexually abused by the prison guards, and statistics from 2019 show that the women's penitentiary had 125 inmates. Now, the CIP has called for an independent commission of inquiry to be set up to look into their findings, to include the Public Prosecutor's Office, MPs, and also human rights defence organisations. Absolutely shocking. But this is not just common to Mozambique. Let's get it right and let's call it as it is, shall we? The systematic abuse of women in countries of colour, ranging from Africa, the Middle East, West Asia and Central Asia is nothing short of a disgrace. Yet the irony is most of those peoples are religious and yet treat women like second-class citizens and think that they are their property and can do with them as they see fit. No, you can't. And more work needs to be done within those countries to correct their archaic rules and laws that discriminate against women. And the great question is, does your God tell you to treat women like a piece of meat? If not, why do it? If your God approves or hasn't, then that God is a misogynistic bastard, pure and simple, and you need to replace it or him. Rape and other sexual abuses are rampant in those countries, and yet again, where are all the authorities addressing these matters? In reality, men who control women are weak. Weak as piss. And spiritually underdeveloped or just plain retarded. And what's awaiting you upon your life reviews at the end of your life will be, how did you love? Did you love as equals or non-love and abuse? Because treating your women as second class is not love. Just saying.